My name is Sienna. I'm 28 years old and I live by myself in a cramped apartment in Chicago. 3 weeks ago, I drove 4 hours back to my parents' house for what my mom proudly called our early Christmas family dinner, even though it actually took place on Thanksgiving. According to her, it was more practical that way. Everyone was off work. Everyone could be together. I nearly turned the car around twice during that drive, but guilt has a way of keeping your foot on the gas. So I showed up anyway, carrying a homemade pumpkin pie and a smile that felt stiff and empty. Dinner was loud and messy. Football blared from the TV. Everyone talked over one another, laughing, pretending we were part of some perfect holiday movie. After the plates were cleared, my mom stood up and clapped her hands like she was hosting a game show. She brought out a bag stuffed with wrapped gifts and began handing them out one by one. My dad received a new golf shirt. My uncle got a bottle of his favorite expensive wine. My sisters were given thoughtful, personalized gifts, bracelets, a spa voucher. Everyone laughed, hugged my mom, and thanked her. I waited. Of course there had to be something for me too. When the bag was empty and she still hadn't even glanced my way, I finally asked, keeping my voice light, "Is there one for me?" She didn't pause for even a second. "Be grateful you're allowed to sit here," she said, like she was reminding me of my place. My uncle snorted. "At least we still remember your name." The table erupted in laughter. My face burned, but I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply nodded and said, "Good to know." I left early. I drove back to Chicago in complete darkness and made a quiet decision. Something was going to change. Because 2 weeks later, those same people who laughed at me were standing outside my apartment, pounding on my door and begging me to talk. And that's when the real story began. That night, when I got home, I dropped my keys on the counter, threw the pumpkin pie straight into the trash, and sat down on my kitchen floor staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to type out a long message in the family group chat and finally say everything I'd been holding in for years. But I already knew how that would end. I'd be called dramatic, sensitive, ungrateful. So instead, I texted my best friend, Mia. She called me within 30 seconds. I told her everything, the forced smiles, my mom's cruel comment, my uncle's joke, the laughter. There was a long silence on the line, and then Mia said calmly, "Sienna, that's not normal. That's not teasing. That's cruelty. They don't respect you." Hearing someone else say it out loud made something snap into place. While we were still on the phone, I opened my banking app and started scrolling. Monthly gym charges, streaming services under my name that I barely used, a family Amazon Prime account, random concert tickets, food orders, Uber rides, all those little "can you put it on your card" moments that were never paid back. That's when I realized it. For years, I had been their quiet safety net, invisible but essential. They could humiliate me at the table, but they were perfectly comfortable letting my card stay on file. Mia said, "What if you just stop paying? What if you let them feel what it's like to actually lose you?" The thought scared me and excited me at the same time. That weekend, I sat down with my laptop and a notebook and made a list. My mom's yoga and gym memberships, my dad's streaming services and Prime account, my sister's last-minute concert tickets, theme park passes, gas money, every recurring charge tied to my name and their convenience. Then I started canceling. Cancel membership. Turn off auto-renewal. Remove card. With every confirmation email, I felt lighter. I didn't announce anything in the group chat. I didn't explain myself. I simply let the systems they relied on quietly shut down. A few days later, my mom called during my lunch break. No greeting, no concern. "Sienna, my gym card was declined this morning. What happened?" I took a breath and said, "I canceled it. You'll need to set it up yourself." She sounded offended. "You know I need those classes for my health." "You know I depend on that," she said. I replied calmly, "You also know what you said to me at dinner. I'm not paying for people who can laugh at me like that anymore." She gasped, dramatic, like I'd just slapped her through the phone. Later that night, my dad called. The streaming services weren't working. "It says the payment needs to be updated," he complained. "You must have messed something up." "I didn't mess anything up," I said. "I just stopped paying. You're adults. You can manage your own bills." He went quiet for a moment, then snapped. "Family takes care of each other, Sienna." "Exactly," I answered. "That works both ways." After that, the group chat exploded. Passive-aggressive messages started pouring in, comments about how some people forget where they come from, how money isn't everything, and how certain people think it is. No names were mentioned, but the target was obvious. I muted the chat. I also decided I wasn't going home for Christmas. Not this year. No amount of guilt-tripping was going to change that. For the first time in my life, I chose not to play the role they had assigned me. I assumed they'd sulk, maybe talk about me behind my back, eventually move on. What I underestimated was how much they relied on me, not just financially, but for control. Because the more their subscriptions failed and their conveniences disappeared, the more desperate they became. And that's how I ended up with my entire family on the other side of my apartment door, pounding and yelling to be let in. The first real wave came just days after I canceled everything. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a campaign brief, rereading the same sentence over and over, when my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, it was just the family group chat lighting up like an emergency alert. My mom sent a long message about how some people forget who raised them, how deeply hurt she was, and how canceling her gym membership was an attack on her health. She made it sound like I had taken away vital medication, not canceled a membership that had always been charged to my card. She added that yoga was the only thing keeping her sane, as if her emotional well-being had been my responsibility all along. My dad followed with his usual speech about sacrifice and obligation, throwing in his favorite line. "You wouldn't have your fancy Chicago job without us." As if my degree and career were items on a tab I still owed. Then my sisters joined in with emojis and side comments. One of them wrote, "Imagine choosing Netflix over your own mom." Which was ironic, considering I had canceled Netflix too, and they were the ones using it the most. Another message followed. "You've changed so much. You used to be nice." A crying emoji, a broken heart. Same script as always, just louder and public. I stared at the screen, feeling my chest tighten, then muted the chat again and placed my phone face down on my desk. Even then, I could feel it vibrating every few seconds, like it was anxious too. 10 minutes later, Mia texted me screenshots from Instagram. "You seeing this?" she wrote. My younger sister had posted a black background with white text. "Some people will cut off their own blood over money. Remember who was there before your paycheck." She added a broken heart emoji and a small praying hands icon. She didn't tag me, but she didn't have to. Half of our extended family followed both of us. My mom commented beneath it, "So sad but true. Love you, baby. Some people lose their way." Then the rest poured in. Family over everything. Money can't buy loyalty. People change when they move to the city. Someone even wrote, "You guys are the strongest family I know." That one almost made me laugh, if it hadn't hurt so much. My stomach tightened as I scrolled. They were rewriting the story in real time, casting themselves as the wounded victims and turning me into some cold, selfish villain who abandoned them for money and skyline views. No one mentioned my mom telling me to be grateful I was allowed at the table. No one mentioned my uncle turning my name into a joke. No one mentioned the years of, "Can you just put it on your card?" moments that somehow didn't count. I locked my phone, set it aside, and sat quietly, listening to the hum of the office and the steady tapping of keyboards around me. That's when it hit me. I had spent my entire life terrified of being labeled ungrateful, so I overgave. I overextended. I kept proving I wasn't that person. And now, the moment I finally said no, they slapped that exact label on me anyway. That night, instead of crying like I usually would have, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop. and logged back into my banking app. If they wanted to talk about sacrifice and responsibility, fine. We could talk in numbers, the one language that doesn't bend for guilt or manipulation. I pulled up 5 full years of transactions and started filtering. Gym fees, yoga studio memberships, streaming services, Amazon Prime family plan, theme park tickets labeled for Harper and Friends, concert tickets charged at 11:59 p.m. after frantic messages promising, "I'll PayPal you, I swear." Emergency car repairs my uncle couldn't afford that somehow ended up on my card, paired with, "I'll pay you back when my bonus hits." It never did. Restaurant bills where I picked up the check because, "You make more than us, it's not a big deal," said casually, but accepted very seriously. It hurt to look at. And somehow, it was also satisfying. Every highlighted charge brought back the exact conversation that went with it. The moment I swallowed my frustration, smiled, and said it was fine. I copied everything into a spreadsheet, added dates, short descriptions, color-coded the categories just to keep myself grounded. I watched the total climb higher and higher until I had to lean back and just stare at the screen. This wasn't generosity. This was a pattern. Years of me acting as the backup plan whenever someone forgot their wallet, came up short, or needed help, just until Friday. That's when I realized something I'd never fully admitted before. To them, my money wasn't mine. It was an extension of theirs, something they felt entitled to because we shared blood and history. I opened a new document, drafted an email, and addressed it to my parents and both of my sisters. The subject line read, "Since we're discussing who owes what." I stared at it for a moment, my finger hovering over the keyboard, then finally started typing. In the message, I kept my tone straightforward. I wrote that I knew what my parents had done for me growing up, that I was thankful for a home, food, and an education, that I wasn't pretending I had raised myself or survived without help. But I also made it clear that the idea I somehow owed them unlimited financial support and unquestioning tolerance for the rest of my life wasn't accurate, and it wasn't healthy. Then I pasted the spreadsheet total beneath my message, followed by a brief breakdown of the categories. I didn't accuse them of stealing. I didn't demand repayment like a collection agency. I simply wrote, "If you want to keep saying I'm selfish and ungrateful for stopping these payments, please look at this and ask yourself who has actually been taking care of whom." My hands were trembling when I hit send. My heart was pounding, the way it does right before you step into icy water. But there was relief too, like setting down a weight I'd been carrying for years without realizing how heavy it had become. My mom's response came quickly. The subject line was in all caps, "How dare you?" The email itself was a wall of text. She called my list cruel and manipulative, said only a heartless person would throw money in their parents' faces, accused me of trying to put a price tag on her love and sacrifices. Every example I gave was rewritten into a story about how difficult their lives had been and how deeply ungrateful I was for daring to make them feel small. She ended with, "I am ashamed of who you've become," and added that she didn't even recognize me anymore. Then she blocked me on Facebook. I know she did because less than an hour later, Mia sent me another screenshot. My mom had posted one of those generic family quote images, something like, "Family is forever, even when some members forget." The caption went on about staying strong in hard times and being thankful for the children who still honor their parents and understand true loyalty. The likes and supportive comments poured in. "You're such a good mom. Your kids are lucky to have you. Don't let anyone destroy your family." None of them knew they were applauding someone who had used the word grateful as a weapon against her own child at a dinner table. None of them knew that every comforting Netflix night and every peaceful yoga morning she enjoyed had been quietly paid for by the daughter she had humiliated in front of everyone. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, shaking with anger. But beneath the anger, there was something else, clarity. sharp and clean. They weren't going to wake up one day and suddenly see me differently. They were invested in this version of me. The difficult, ungrateful daughter who moved to the city, owed them everything, and gave them endless reasons to complain. The only thing I actually controlled was what I allowed them access to. My money, my time, my energy, and my silence. As Christmas drew closer and more of their comforts either shut off or demanded new payment details, the tone of their behavior shifted. The passive-aggressive social media posts slowed down. The phone calls became more urgent. Guilt-tripping turned into real panic. They stopped taking shots at me from behind screens and started scrambling in real life, trying to cover the gaps where my support used to be. That's when their entitlement boiled over into something louder, uglier, and impossible to ignore. The kind of desperation that doesn't stay online, but shows up at your front door. 2 weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner, I was home alone on a Saturday afternoon. I was half watching some random YouTube video, doing my best not to think about my family at all, when the building buzzer went off. At first, I assumed it was a delivery, but I hadn't ordered anything. Then my phone lit up with my dad's name. I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, my mom started calling. Then the buzzer sounded again, longer this time, like someone was leaning on it. My stomach dropped. I walked to the intercom and pressed the button just enough to hear the lobby noise. That's when my mom's voice echoed up the stairwell, sharp and loud. "Sienna, we know you're home, buzz us in." There was a forced cheerfulness in her tone, like she was trying to sound pleasant in case anyone else was listening. Underneath it, though, was pure anger. I froze for a moment, then quietly checked the hallway through the peephole. A few minutes later, I saw them. My parents were standing right outside my apartment door. They had clearly convinced another tenant to let them into the building. My mom was holding a shiny red gift bag, tissue paper spilling out like something from a holiday commercial. My dad had a couple of smaller bags hanging from his wrist. Behind me, my phone started ringing again on the table. I ignored it. My mom knocked softly at first, 3 light taps. "Sienna, sweetheart, open the door," she called out. "We brought you something. We just want to talk before Christmas." She made sure to say it loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. I took a breath, stepped closer to the door but didn't unlock it. "I don't want to talk right now," I said through the wood. "You need to leave." Her tone shifted instantly. The sweetness vanished. She knocked harder, the bags rustling loudly. "We drove 4 hours to get here, Sienna. 4 hours. The least you can do is open the door and speak to your own parents." My dad jumped in, already irritated. "This is ridiculous. We're not having a conversation through a door. Open it." I didn't move. "No," I said. "You don't get to humiliate me, mock me, and then show up with gift bags like that fixes anything. You need to go." There was a brief silence. Then the knocking turned into pounding. My mom's voice rose, shaky, dramatic. "Do you even hear yourself? This is what that city has done to you." "So now you think you're better than us," my mom shouted through the door. "You cancel everything without warning. You send that horrible email and now you won't even face us." She began to sniff loudly, forcing tears into her voice. "Our family is falling apart and you don't even care," she cried. My dad lowered his voice, but the anger was still there. "This is about respect, Sienna. You owed us a chance to talk face to face. Be an adult and open the door." I almost laughed at "be an adult," considering this entire mess started with them, humiliating me in front of everyone like I was a child. Instead, I said calmly, "Respect works both ways. Standing outside my apartment trying to force a conversation I already said no to isn't respect." My phone vibrated in my hand. It was my younger sister calling. I didn't answer. A second later, a text came through. "They're outside your door, just open it. Don't make this worse. Mom is freaking out." I typed back, "They showed up without asking. That's on them." Her reply came almost instantly. "You're being cruel. They brought Christmas gifts to fix things. Right on cue, my mom leaned into that angle. She raised her voice again. We brought you presents, Sienna. We didn't forget you. We're trying. This is what you wanted, right? Attention. It was almost impressive how she twisted it. I pictured the bags in her hands, maybe a generic sweater from a sale rack, a candle, something they could later point to and say, we tried, and she rejected us. I don't want gifts, I said through the door. You can't fix this with presents. You haven't even apologized for what you said, for laughing at me in front of everyone. There was a brief silence. Then my mom snapped. Oh my God, are you still stuck on that? It was a joke, Sienna, a joke. Normal people can take a joke at dinner. My dad added, you're blowing one comment out of proportion and punishing the entire family over it. That was the moment I understood there was nothing waiting for me on the other side of that door. Not right now. Not like this. I pulled my phone out and sent my mom a text. You have 10 minutes to leave, or I'm calling building security. Out loud, I said, you need to go, I'm serious. The pounding stopped for a moment. Then it came back harder. My mom's voice cracked. We need to talk. Please open the door. Don't do this to us. Don't do this to your mother. My heart was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I didn't touch the lock. I just stood there, staring at the doorknob, repeating silently, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say no. After nearly 20 minutes of knocking, crying, pleading, and my dad muttering that I was being unreasonable, they finally left. Later that evening, I received a polite message from a neighbor through the building's portal, asking if everything was okay and mentioning the very loud scene outside my apartment earlier. I sat on my couch afterward, shaking, and opened a blank note on my phone. I started writing down everything, every word they said, every sound outside the door, every tight, aching feeling in my chest. I didn't want them rewriting the story later and convincing me that I'd imagined everything. I needed it documented. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. This wasn't about one holiday dinner or a handful of canceled subscriptions. This was about control. They weren't used to me having boundaries. And they were reacting badly to the word no. After they finally drove away that day, I truly believed the worst had passed. I told myself they'd vent to their friends, complain about me for a while, and eventually back off. I was wrong. That visit wasn't the climax. It was a warm-up. The next time they showed up, they wouldn't come armed with gift bags and guilt. They would bring something heavier and show me exactly how far they were willing to go to force me back into the role they needed me to play. After the scene outside my door, things went quiet for a short while, almost peaceful. The family group chat slowed to vague posts about forgiveness and praying for people who had lost their way. I muted it. I buried myself in work, met Mia for coffee, and tried to sleep without hearing my mom's voice repeating, "Be grateful you can sit here," in my head. I told myself it was over. It was. The calls started again. At first, they came from my parents' numbers. I let them go to voicemail. My mom cried about sleepless nights, her blood pressure, and how stress like this could kill her, asking if that was what I wanted. My dad's messages were colder. I was tearing the family apart. I owed them a conversation because they raised me. When I stopped responding, they switched tactics and started calling from unfamiliar local numbers. I answered one, thinking it was work. My mom's voice came through immediately. "So you do know how to answer the phone," she said, like she'd caught me in a lie. I hung up. Then my Uncle Chuck joined in, leaving voicemails about how you can't cancel your family like a subscription and how one day I'd need them. Online, my sister posted another sad TikTok about being abandoned by a sibling who chose money and strangers over the people who had been there since day one. She didn't name me, but the caption, "Sometimes blood hurts more than strangers," made it obvious. Strangers flooded her comments with support, telling her to cut toxic people out of her life. Meanwhile, the real-world consequences of my canceled payments started landing. My mom left a frantic voicemail about the gym requiring a new card and a reactivation fee. She repeated that yoga was the only thing keeping her calm and asked how I could do this to her. A cousin told me my dad had been complaining at the golf club about ungrateful kids who treat their parents like ATMs. One night, I opened my spreadsheet again and added a new column labeled behavior. Calls, guilt trips, TikToks, surprise visits. Seeing it all lined up made it impossible to deny what was happening. This wasn't a phase. It was a system, and I had stopped participating. A few days before Christmas, it shifted from digital back to physical. I came home carrying groceries, saw my parents' car parked outside the building, and felt my stomach sink. When I reached my floor, my mom, my dad, and my Uncle Chuck were standing in front of my apartment door like a human barricade. "There she is," my mom said loudly. "Do you feel proud calling security on your own parents?" I set the grocery bag down and tightened my grip on my keys. "You're not supposed to be here," I said firmly. "You need to leave." My dad immediately said they weren't going anywhere. Driven all that way to speak to me face to face, and I owed them that much. My mom launched into a speech about how they were trying to save the family, while I hid in my little apartment, treating them like parasites. My uncle leaned back against the wall, smirking. He asked if I really believed my neighbors cared about me more than my own blood. "You don't just cancel blood," he said. I told them that being related didn't give them the right to show up after I had clearly told them to stop. My mom scoffed. She said no one had grabbed me, accused me of twisting the situation, and claimed I was exaggerating everything just so I could label them as abusive and feel justified. My dad stepped closer until the door was right behind me. "Here, what's going to happen?" he said. "You're coming home with us for Christmas. This little stunt ends now." My voice shook, but I didn't back down. "No, I've told you to leave. You're harassing me." My mom suddenly slammed her palm into the doorframe next to my head so hard I jumped. She started yelling about everything they'd given me and how much I owed them. My uncle noticed me flinch. He smiled and then put his hand on my shoulder, trying to move me away from the lock. Something inside me went completely still. I shrugged his hand off and said loudly, clearly, "Do not touch me again." I pulled out my phone and called building security. "My family is here again," I said. "I've asked them to leave. They won't. One of them put their hands on me. I need someone up here now." They stared at me like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. Security arrived, listened to both sides, then turned to them and said, "She lives here. She asked you to leave. You can't keep coming here and causing disturbances. If you return again, we'll involve the police." He escorted them to the elevator while my mom cried. My dad muttered about ungrateful children, and my uncle shot me one last look. "You're going to regret this," he said under his breath. Later that evening, management slid a notice under my door. It documented the incident and stated that they were not allowed back without my permission. Repeated visits could result in a no trespass order and police involvement. For the first time, there was something official, something written, that said this wasn't just family drama. Other people had seen it. Other people were willing to name it for what it was. I wanted to believe that warning would be enough. But people who are used to control rarely give it up because of a single piece of paper. And the next time they came, it wouldn't just be security getting involved. A few days before Christmas, I finally began to relax. Security had filed their report. My parents and uncle had already been escorted out once. My phone was quiet for the first time in weeks. I blocked a few numbers, muted the family group chat, buried myself in year-end work, and focused on my plan to spend Christmas Eve with Mia, take out food and terrible movies. I told myself it was over. I was wrong. One afternoon, I was climbing the stairs with groceries when I heard my last name echo through the stairwell. My mother's voice, sharp and far too loud. "She's on this floor, I know she is. Sienna, get out here right now." My stomach dropped. When I turned the corner onto my floor, they were there again. My mom, my dad, and my Uncle Chuck, standing in the middle of the hallway, outside my apartment like they owned it. My mom spun toward me the second she saw me. "There you are," she snapped. "Do you feel powerful now, calling security on your own parents?" My dad stood rigid beside her, jaw tight. My uncle lounged against the wall like this was entertainment. I set my grocery bag down slowly and kept my keys clenched in my hand. "You're not supposed to be here," I said evenly. "You need to leave." "We're not leaving," my dad replied. "Not until you stop acting like a stranger and speak to us like an adult. We drove all this way before Christmas to fix this." My mom jumped in, her voice rising so it carried down the hallway. "We're still fighting for this family," she said. "You cut us off. You humiliate us with that email. You call security on us and you can't even look at us. We gave you everything." I noticed doors opening along the hall. My uncle pushed off the wall and stepped closer. "You really think these people care about you more than we do?" he asked, gesturing toward the other apartments. "When that big city life of yours falls apart, you think they'll take you in? Blood is blood, kid. You don't cancel that." Something inside me hardened. "Being related isn't a free pass," I said. "It doesn't give you the right to show up at my home after I told you to stop. It doesn't give you permission to yell at me, corner me, or touch me." My mom scoffed. "No one touched you," she snapped. "You twist everything to make us sound like monsters. Security said there was nothing on camera last time. You've decided we're abusive so you can feel justified." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my older neighbor down the hall standing in her doorway, her phone raised and recording again. Our eyes met. She gave me a small nod. "I see this. I'm not ignoring it." My dad stepped closer until my back hit my own door. His voice dropped, controlled and threatening. "Here, what's going to happen?" he said. "You're packing a bag. You're coming home with us for Christmas, and we're going to sit down and sort this out. This nonsense with canceling payments and calling security ends now." My hands were shaking, but my voice didn't waver. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you. I've told you to leave me alone. You keep coming back. This is harassment." My mom slammed her palm against the doorframe beside my head. The crack was loud enough to make me flinch. "Harassment," she hissed. "We gave you life. You wouldn't have this apartment, this job, anything without us. You owe us respect. You owe us Christmas. You owe us more than this." My uncle noticed me flinch and smiled. "You call that harassment?" he said, then placed his hand on my shoulder and shoved just enough to move me away from the lock. It wasn't a punch. It was a message. "We still control you." Something in me went completely still. I knocked his hand away and said loudly, clearly, "Do not touch me again." Before he could respond, my neighbor's voice cut through the hallway. "I'm calling the police," she said firmly. "This is the second time you've done this. She asked you to leave. I'm recording everything." For a moment, everyone froze. My mom whipped around. "This is none of your business. This is family." My neighbor didn't back down. "You made it our business when you started screaming in the hallway." In the distance, I could hear sirens, faint, but getting closer. My mom turned back toward me, her expression shifting instantly into that familiar broken, pleading tone I knew all too well. "Sienna, stop this," my mother begged. "Tell them it's fine. Tell her not to call. Do you really want your uncle arrested? Do you want your mother collapsing right here? Is that what you want for Christmas?" My chest tightened. For a split second, that old instinct kicked in, the urge to smooth things over, to apologize, to make it all end. Then I remembered the spreadsheet. The dinner table. The way they laughed while I sat there, burning. I took a steady breath. "I want you to leave," I said. "If you didn't want the police involved, you shouldn't have come back." A few minutes later, 2 officers walked down the hallway, taking in the scene. My parents and uncle, my neighbor holding her phone up, and me pressed against my door with my keys clenched in my fist. One officer looked directly at me. "Do you live here?" he asked. Yes, I said. They're my family. I've asked them to leave multiple times. Building security already escorted them out once. They keep coming back. They've put their hands on me. I don't feel safe. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. The second officer spoke to my neighbor, who immediately showed them the video. My uncle grabbing my shoulder, my mother slamming her hand into the door inches from my head. That was enough. The first officer turned to my family, his tone firm and unmistakable. You need to leave the property now. You've already been warned. This is harassment. Being related doesn't give you the right to corner her here. If you return or continue contacting her like this, she can pursue charges and a restraining order. My mother broke down, crying about worried parents. My father argued about his rights as a father. My uncle muttered under his breath about soft cops and disrespectful kids. The officers didn't engage. They pulled my uncle aside, asked for his ID, and issued him a citation, explaining exactly what it meant. He stood there, face flushed, as the officer told him plainly that he was now officially on record for harassing his niece. Watching him, this man who had mocked and belittled me my entire life, stare at the floor while someone in authority named him as the problem did something to me. For once, I wasn't the one being shamed in public. As they escorted my parents and uncle toward the elevator, my mother clutched her chest, saying she felt dizzy, that the stress was too much. The officer offered to call an ambulance, but my dad insisted he would take her to the hospital himself. Later, I learned her blood pressure had spiked, and she spent the night in the ER. My dad was furious about both the hospital bills and the citation. My uncle, who used to boast about our perfect family at the bar, was suddenly a lot quieter. After they finally left, building management slid a notice under my door confirming the incident. It stated that my parents and uncle were not allowed back on the property without prior approval and reminded me that I could pursue a restraining order if I wished. A cousin texted me later, "People are talking. I saw a video of your mom and uncle yelling in your hallway. You okay?" I stared at the message for a moment, then replied, "I'm okay, better than before." For the first time, the consequences of their actions were landing on them instead of me. Christmas passed in total silence between us. That quiet didn't feel like punishment, it felt like space. Space where I could finally start imagining a life that wasn't built around managing their chaos. In the weeks after Christmas, the silence from my family felt almost unreal. I kept expecting another explosion, another surprise visit, another flood of guilt-laden messages, but there was nothing. No Merry Christmas, no Happy New Year, not even a passive-aggressive quote with my name hidden in the lines. At first, it felt like standing in a room right after the fire alarm stops, my body still braced for noise that wasn't coming. Slowly, it began to feel like something else, freedom. Through cousins and mutual friends, I caught glimpses of what was happening back home. My mom had to follow her doctor's orders after that ER visit. He told her plainly that if she didn't manage her stress, serious health problems could follow. Without my money quietly covering extras, she had to cut back on her gym and some social outings she used to boast about. She even asked a younger coworker to help her figure out budgeting and how auto-pay really worked. My dad had to deal with streaming and subscription companies himself, sit on hold, reset passwords, and figure things out without just saying, "Ask Lauren." He complained loudly about my mom's hospital bill and my uncle's citation, but this time there was no one to offload the cost onto. My Uncle Chuck's, funny guy, image took a hit as well. People at his bar and golf club had seen, or at least heard about, the video of him grabbing my shoulder in the hallway. Cops had written his name down on a citation. He didn't go to jail, but the damage was done. It's hard to be the charming uncle when everyone knows you're the guy who got the police called on you by your own niece. My sisters grew quieter online. Fewer concert selfies and last-minute trips, more posts about working extra shifts and grinding toward their goals. When I stepped back as their invisible safety net, they had to stand on their own. That's what clicked for me. My boundary didn't just make me stronger, it forced all of us to grow. Once the adrenaline faded, I crashed a little. With no new drama to distract me, all the old memories floated to the surface. The jokes that weren't really jokes. The times I had quietly paid the bills and swallowed my resentment, and the years I had believed keeping the peace was my responsibility. I finally scheduled a therapist instead of just talking about it endlessly. During our first session, she asked, "When did you learn that your job in the family was to fix everything?" I didn't have a tidy answer, but the question lingered with me. I also found an online support group and a subreddit full of stories that hit uncomfortably close to home. Parents who weaponized guilt, relatives who used family ties like a leash, siblings who only reached out when they needed something. Reading those posts, I saw words I'd never dared apply to my own situation: manipulation, emotional abuse, financial exploitation. It didn't erase what had happened, but it shifted how I judged myself for finally stepping away. Months later, my mom sent a brief email. No subject line, just, "I'm sorry things got so bad between us. I don't agree with how you handled everything, but I miss you. I hope you're okay." It wasn't the apology I had dreamed of, but it was something. I didn't respond immediately. When I did, I kept it short. I told her I was okay, that I hoped she was taking her health seriously, and that if we ever spoke again, it would have to be different. No yelling, no guilt, no pretending Thanksgiving had been just a joke. I said I was open to a conversation someday, preferably with a therapist present, but I would not go back to paying for everything or being expected to be grateful just to sit at the table. Hitting send didn't feel like opening the door. It felt like locking the old version of our relationship behind me, leaving just a small, guarded window. I don't know exactly what the future holds for my family. Maybe we'll build something smaller and healthier. Maybe low contact will last forever. But what I do know is this: for the first time, my peace doesn't hinge on their moods. I pay my own bills. I spend holidays with people who don't make me the punchline and call it love. I no longer measure my worth by how useful I am to the people who raised me. If there's a lesson here, it's that family is not a free pass to disrespect you. Love without respect is control in disguise. Boundaries aren't betrayal, they're self-respect in action. And sometimes, the most satisfying kind of revenge isn't slamming a door. It's walking away. Letting people face the consequences of their own behavior. Building a life where you aren't grateful just to be allowed in the room, but genuinely proud to stand on your own. Have you ever had to choose your own sanity over your family's approval? If you haven't yet, what line would they have to cross for you to finally say enough? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Follow along with Justice After Dark for all the latest content.